All right. Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay online? Yes. And everyone in the Zendo?
Yes.
Good. All right. So first I want to apologize if there's any noise from my end. They're doing construction in the building next door. And then this week, my upstairs neighbor decided to do some construction as well. So we could say it's been enriching for my practice, to say the least. Um, but hello and good evening to everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kojin, and I'm a senior student here at the Village Zendo. And it's really great to see you all. I feel like I don't get to see all your faces enough. And it's also really great to practice with you this evening. I am tuning in from Mexico City, so it's still afternoon here. And during zazen, I'd been enjoying noticing the way the sunlight slowly shifted the colors of my room as it moved across the front of my building. And during zazen, without my usual ways to distract or entertain myself, then something as simple as watching the shifting sunlight can feel like Disneyland. So tonight at the Zendo is our newcomers meeting. So to those of you that are joining us for the first time, or those of you that are newish, I'd like to extend a very special welcome to you. I still remember the first time that I visited the Village Zendo. And I didn't know why at the time, but somehow I knew that this was it. It was like I'd been forging my way through an overgrown forest my whole life, trying to find my way. And then when I came across the Zen teachings, it was like someone taking hold of my hand and just pointing right over there. And right next to me was a path that was already forged. And from there, all I needed to do was put one foot in front of the other, following a path that's already been traveled by countless people before me. So even though we all come across this path for different reasons, under different circumstances, if you're just dipping your toes in this practice, I really encourage you to give it a real wholehearted go. And this week also happens to be the last week of our 3-month intensive practice period, also known as Winter Ongo. And we'll conclude Ongo this weekend with a half-day retreat on Saturday. And on Sunday, we'll have our Shuso Hosen ceremony, where our practice leader, Rakushin, will give her first Dharma talk. And she'll be recognized as a senior student in our community. So it's a really moving and really lively ceremony. So I hope you'll all join us for all or part of the weekend. So this week I returned from the Philippines after visiting family. But because of that, I've been struggling with a lot of jet lag as I've tried to come up with a subject for my talk, let alone write something to talk about. So as I've been trying to come up with a topic for my talk, I've been thinking about the ingredients of my own practice lately and some of the things that I've kind of been chewing on, or maybe even struggling with. And you could say that, this has been my koan lately. And if you're not familiar with koans, usually they're presented as these old stories or teachings, and there's often a punchline. And superficially, they might come off as slightly nonsensical. But as we practice with these koans, the koan's meaning slowly starts to reveal itself as we slowly digest it and slowly chew on it. And that's kind of the formal way that we practice with koans. But really, a koan can be whatever we're facing right now. So, whatever we can't quite resolve, or whatever keeps showing up in our life. So, for me lately, my koan has been investigating feelings of lack within my practice, feelings that maybe there's something missing, or that my practice isn't fully complete or realized. And I think there's a few reasons behind this feeling of lack. I moved to Mexico City about 2 years ago. But before that, I was pretty steeped in practice. I'd come to the Village Zendo every single morning. And even at one point, I left New York to spend a year and a half doing residential practice at a monastic center in California. So to move away from New York, to move away from the Sangha, and to try to maintain my own home practice here in Mexico City, it's felt a bit ungrounding. It's felt like I was once again trying to forge my own way through an overgrown path. And it felt like my practice wasn't as strong when I was practicing alone. It felt like something was lacking being away from the Village Zendo. And I think feelings of lack or the feeling of something missing can come up for a lot of people over the course of practice. When we're just beginning practice, sitting zazen, at times it can feel like a deep exhale and a relief. And other times it might feel overwhelming as we engage in this process of getting to know ourselves and becoming familiar with our minds. And there can be a sense that things will only make sense once we get to that destination over there. And even people that have practiced for many years can get stuck. There can be a grasping for some romanticized idea of enlightenment. There can be a grasping for a feeling of getting somewhere with practice. And then there's the possibility of really having a genuine, deep experience of realization. But then the danger of clinging to that experience and creating a new standard of practice based on that. And in that grasping or clinging for something, there's the risk of manufacturing a sense of incompleteness within our practice. But one of the great punchlines of Zen is that, we practice and we practice and we practice and we practice, only to find out that we're not really going anywhere. And only to find out that there was really nowhere to go in the first place. We find that practice was never leading us somewhere else. The practice itself is the point. So from that perspective of not going anywhere and of nowhere to go, nothing is lacking. Nothing is lacking within our lives, within our practice. There's a completeness and a wholeness with that integration. One of our study texts for this Ango is a fascicle from Dōgen's Shobogenzo called Birth and Death. And I think that there's an excerpt from that points to this. In it, Dōgen says, just understand that birth and death is itself nirvana. There is nothing such as birth and death to be avoided. There is nothing such as nirvana to be sought. Only when you realize this are you free from birth and death. So as you can see, Dōgen's writings are notoriously dense. I remember a few years ago when I was having a particular moment of frustration, I said to another Zen student, why does he need to talk so cryptically? Why can't Dōgen just say whatever the hell he means? And my friend cheekily responded, he's probably saying exactly what he means. And I can't claim to be able to decipher all of Dōgen's writings, but I've been chewing on this teaching for a little while within my own practice. And let's take a look at that first sentence. Dōgen says, just understand that birth and death is itself nirvana. So what is this birth and death that Dōgen's talking about? For me, it points to a fullness, a completeness. Birth and death and everything in between, and actually nothing outside of it either. Where can one say that our birth ends and our death begins? One might think that there's a point in our lives where we grow from baby to child to adolescent to adult, then a point where we age, and then a point where we die. But is there any definitive point where any of these stages truly start and stop? And where can we say one moment of our life begins and the next one ends? It could be that every moment of our lives is birth and death, a kind of continuous unfolding. In a moment of zazen, when we inhale, the whole universe inhales with us. And when we exhale, our entire being is that exhale. And when lost in thought, the whole universe is also lost in that thought. And this reminds me of an injury that I had a few years ago while at the gym when I pulled my back deadlifting. I don't know if you've ever experienced pulling a muscle like that, but it can be absolutely excruciating. And I remember right up to that moment where I pulled my back, I realized that my form was wrong and I was about to injure myself, but I was already in the action of that movement. And in that following movement of extraordinary pain, it was so intense that there was only that pain. In that moment, the whole universe was pain. And in that moment, only birth and death. And that's a bit of a dramatic example, but every moment, birth and death, suffering, joy, anger, clarity, confusion. Dōgen tells us not to search for the Buddha outside of these experiences. Don't look over there outside of ourselves. The Buddha is right here and now. Therefore, how can anything be lacking? Dōgen goes on to say, there is nothing such as birth and death to be avoided. There is nothing such as nirvana to be sought. Only when you realize this are you free from birth and death. So nothing to be avoided. Nothing such as nirvana to be sought. Only when you realize this are you free from birth and death. Now, on the one hand, given the cryptic way that Dōgen presents these things, this teaching can sometimes feel abstract, and it might even feel a little bit out of reach. But I really think he's pointing to something quite ordinary, really nothing special at all, just our very ordinary lives. Later in this fascicle, Dōgen says, this birth and death is the life of a Buddha. If you try to exclude it, you will lose the life of a Buddha. If you cling to it, trying to remain in it, you will also lose the life of a Buddha. So there's nothing to run towards, and there's nothing to run away from. I think Dōgen's pointing to the fact that this very life, this changing, unstable, birth and death life, is itself the life of Buddha. So reading this, it feels really silly, actually, that I should feel like there's anything lacking within my practice. How can anything be lacking when practicing itself and life and death are all right here and right now? Now, this is all really easy to say. And from an intellectual level, I think it makes a lot of sense. And honestly, it sounds really nice. But how does one feel it and know it in one's bones, in one's gut? I think that from within the walls of the Zendo, or from our meditation cushions at home, it's a lot easier to actualize and realize this. But what about when we leave the Zendo, when we walk out of our house? In this world of war, where opening up the news can trigger us 101 different ways, or even facing something as mundane as a sink full of dirty dishes. I think that's the big koan. Walking off the cushion and facing our lives. But I think what Dōgen keeps pointing to is that that is the whole point. Practice itself is the way. And this ever-shifting ground of our lives is also the way. And even feelings of incompleteness or lack, also not outside of the way. So when Dōgen says, there is nothing such as birth and death to be avoided, nothing such as nirvana to be sought, only when you realize this are you free from birth and death. This makes me think about my own reactions when I witness what's happening all around the world. Some days I walk around with such anger at what's happening. I can be so angry that such corrupt men in our world hold so much power, and that such injustice can be allowed to happen, and how there's seemingly no antidote or accountability for it all. And so from this lens, I can choose to run away from those feelings, or I can choose to admonish myself for having those feelings in the first place. Or when I see suffering, don't exclude it. When I experience clarity, don't cling to it. And furthermore, when washing dishes, just wash dishes. And when protesting fascism, just protesting fascism. And this reminds me of a popular image, the popular image of the lotus, which in Buddhism is often used to symbolize awakening. This beautiful flower can only grow in muddy, murky water. Without the mud, there is no lotus. And for the lotus, the mud is exactly what allows it to grow. And so in our muddy, unsettled lives, and with practice that can sometimes feel uncertain or incomplete, there's actually nothing to run toward and nothing to run away from. Just this life, just this breath, just this moment of birth and death. And right here, right now, the lotus blooms. And when we sit zazen, nothing is lacking. And when we leave the Zendo, nothing is lacking. Even in confusion, nothing is lacking. And even in pain, nothing is lacking. And this doesn't mean that practice doesn't matter. We sit, we struggle, we doubt, and we come back again and again and again. And through that very practice, I think we begin to see that nothing was ever missing to begin with. And so maybe a part of practice is just learning little by little to stop looking for something else and to just realize that this very messy, imperfect birth and death life is exactly the ground where the lotus grows. Thank you.